The Jets' win over the Cleveland Browns reminds us that Breece Hall is a critical part of the team's present, and the Jets need to pay him this offseason to make sure he's part of the future. Locked On Jets starts now.
You are Locked On Jets, your daily New York Jets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome. This is the Locked On Jets podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. It is Monday, November 10th, 2025, and I'm your host, John B. from GangGreenNation.com. Thanking you so much for making the show your first listen or first watch every day, and a big shout out to you everydayers. This is a daily podcast covering the New York Jets with new episodes each day through the week, Monday through Friday, and today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can bet just $5, and if your bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. Well, on today's show, we're going to break down a New York Jets win. The Jets defeated the Cleveland Browns yesterday, 27-20 at MetLife Stadium to improve their record to 2-7 on the season. The news was not all good for the Jets. Justin Fields came back to earth with a really, really rough performance 2 weeks after he was stellar against the Cincinnati Bengals. So we'll talk about that. But there are plenty of heroes in this game to discuss for the New York Jets. We hope that those heroes will build on those performances. We'll talk about some of those guys. But we'll begin by talking about the guy who I thought was the biggest star in this game. And with no disrespect to Will McDonald, who had 4 sacks, who was stellar, who we'll talk about in a bit, for me, the most important player for the New York Jets was Breece Hall. And the reason I say that is if you watch this game, you saw the way these two quarterbacks were struggling. Dillon Gabriel, a rookie who doesn't seem like he's really fully up to NFL speed right now, and Justin Fields, who once again, and we've seen this so many times this year, struggling to execute at a very basic level. 2 weeks ago against the Bengals, he had a stellar game, but more often than not this year, Fields hasn't been just bad. He's been bad to a point where you can't really move the ball through the passing game. And it became clear to me watching this game that this was going to come down to some player on either side. Maybe it'd be an offensive player, maybe it'd be a defensive player. Somebody had to take the game over, and somebody had to produce a few big plays. And for the Jets, that ended up being Breece Hall, who became not just the best player on offense, he became the offense late in the third and through the fourth quarter of this game. Now, one of the things that kind of baffles me is that the Jets didn't really use Breece until late in the third quarter. The first 27 plays, Breece only got the ball 6 times. That's difficult to explain on most weeks. But on a week where the offense was struggling in such a profound way, the Jets put up points, but their points were put up because they returned 2 kicks for touchdowns. Kene Nwangwu ran back a kickoff for a touchdown in the first half. That was followed by an Isaiah Williams punt return for a touchdown. Jets offense was really struggling, and a big part of that, of course, was Fields. You would think that when your quarterback is having issues to the extent Fields is having issues, you would lean on a star running back like Breece Hall, especially when you're struggling to get Garrett Wilson involved, and then Garrett Wilson leaves the game. Now, one thing I'm going to say is kind of controversial, and I know people will disagree with this. I'm starting to feel like Justin Fields is the best thing that ever happened to the Jets' new offensive coordinator, Tanner Engstrand, because I think a lot of people are kind of excusing the Jets' offensive struggles, or at least they're excusing Engstrand's role in the Jets' offensive struggles because they're saying, well, when the quarterback functions like that, it's tough to call plays. And it is. But I think Fields' struggles are kind of camouflaging some very basic issues with the play calling. And one of those basic issues emerged yesterday when the Jets barely used Breece Hall for the first 3 quarters of the game. Well, fortunately, the Jets turned to Breece Hall starting late in the third quarter, then through the fourth quarter. And on 16 of their last 20 plays, and I'm excluding kneel downs for that, the Jets took the knee a couple times to run out the clock. 16 of the 20 times, Breece got the ball, and he dominated. Jets had 3 successful drives, a touchdown drive that put them ahead, a field goal drive that added a critical insurance score, and then a drive that closed out the game. And of course, on that drive that closed out the game, the Jets were aided because the Browns committed a couple of dumb penalties, dare I say, Jet-like penalties. It was nice to be on the other side of that for once. Normally the Jets are the team committing dumb penalties that allow the other team to ice the game. The Jets are the team committing dumb penalties that prevent them from getting an opportunity to get the ball back with a chance to tie it. For once, somebody else was making the big mistake, although I'm sure Browns fans are used to it. But Breece Hall, I don't think the numbers really do justice to the performance he had, because In the fourth quarter of this game, there were two plays where Breece Hall ran for a 9-yard loss. And neither of them were really his fault. I mean, both of them were kind of botched plays where either a blocking assignment got missed, or there was an issue with securing the snap and securing the handoff, and again there were blocks missed. If you take those two plays out, Breece ran for 101 yards in this game on 19 carries, and he also added a 42-yard touchdown on a screen pass. And you could tell how badly Fields was struggling from the extent to which the announcers praised him for that pass. The announcers are saying, "Well, Fields figured out how to beat a zero blitz." I mean, he threw a screen to Breece Hall. It was Breece who did the work, and there was some good blocking. But Breece took it 42 yards for a touchdown. That was his only target of the game. Again, Tanner Engstrand might want to think about throwing the ball to Breece Hall a little bit more. 4 weeks ago in London, the Jets lost to the Denver Broncos. Breece did not have a target in a game where Fields was really, really struggling. In this game, they only threw the ball to Breece once, and he turned it into a touchdown. Now, of course, during the trade deadline, the Jets made a lot of big moves. They sent out a lot of their big-name players. Sauce Gardner and Quinnen Williams are no longer here. And a lot of people asked, well, why wouldn't the Jets just trade everybody? If it's a fire sale, why would you keep Garrett Wilson and Breece Hall? And to me, the answer to that is clear. We know it's very likely the New York Jets are going to draft a quarterback next spring. So the guys the Jets sent out are defensive players. Those are the guys that help the Jets get those extra draft picks. The Jets, according to one report, said that Garrett Wilson was untouchable. And the Jets were not willing to trade Breece Hall unless they got a day 2 pick in return. And this is logical. I think it makes sense why you would send out two guys who play defense, but you would keep the two guys who are big name players on offense. Because we've seen so many times with the Jets over the last decade and a half where they bring in a rookie quarterback, and the rookie quarterbacks don't really know what they're doing. I mean, in the best case scenarios, usually you see a few flashes. The rookie quarterbacks who step in and dominate from day one are very rare. More often, a rookie quarterback can succeed if you put quality pieces around him. And Garrett Wilson's a quality piece. Garrett Wilson's a number one receiver. The Jets have not had a number one receiver like Garrett Wilson for a rookie quarterback in any of their recent failures. But Breece Hall is also a quality guy you can go to. We saw that yesterday when Justin Fields was once again not just struggling to execute on like a very, very basic level. A guy who, again, kind of looked afraid to throw the ball down the field after a really bad interception in the first half, set up a Browns score. Well, in the second half, the Jets were able to kind of turn to Breece Hall, and they should have done it earlier. But Breece Hall can be a young quarterback's best friend. We know, look, Justin Fields' days as Jets quarterback are near an end. He's probably not coming back next year. At this point, it seems like he's probably not even going to be the starting quarterback at the end of the season. I mean, he's pretty much playing his way out of the lineup. At some point, the Jets are going to have to turn to Tyrod Taylor. Or, if we get to the last couple of weeks, maybe they even give Brady Cook a look. But when you have a young quarterback, it's convenient to be able to just hand the ball to a running back who can make plays. If you're not sure what to do, it's convenient to have a playmaker you can just check down to. I think the Jets made the right move keeping Breece Hall after the trade deadline. But I think they also need to look at extending him long term, because I think there's some concern whether the Jets are going to give him a contract that's too big. But I think if you take the approach the Jets took, where you're totally tearing it down, where you're now loaded up with cap space, you're loaded up with assets, you're going to build around a young quarterback, it's more important to have pieces around the quarterback than it is to have perfect contracts. It's okay to overpay pieces on offense who are going to help lift up a young quarterback. And I think that you saw in this game that Breece Hall is the type of, it's a reminder. It's not like we needed this game to know it, but it's another example of why Breece Hall would be so beneficial to a young quarterback, because you hope the young quarterback's not going to struggle the way Justin Fields has struggled this year. But in games where the young quarterback's struggling, you can just turn to Breece Hall, and Breece can produce big plays. Breece can help you win a game. Now, head here on the Locked On Jets podcast, we'll talk about some other players who really stepped up to help the Jets win this game. There were some standouts on special teams. There were some standouts on defense. The hope is that these guys build on these performances going forward. We'll talk about who the heroes were as we continue here on this Monday edition of Locked On Jets.
Today's show is brought to you by our friends over there at Peloton. Look, folks, it's time to break through the busiest time of the year with a brand new Peloton cross-training Tread Plus that's powered by Peloton IQ. It's Peloton's most elevated technology and equipment yet that gives you real-time guidance, and it gives you endless ways to move, whether you want to work out by yourself or if you want to work out with your favorite instructor, like my personal favorite, Alex Toussaint. He always gets me fired up to tackle the day. And the thing I like about Peloton, it helps me achieve more in less times. They have features that help you plan, stay motivated, track your progress, and Peloton IQ also provides personalized workout plans and recommendations. That's something that I use right now during the busiest time of the year covering the NFL. They plan my workouts for me based on my mood, my vibe, and also my favorite instructors. So make sure you check it out and use it, because it also helps you correct your form in real time, and it maximizes your reps. It counts your reps so that you can do it smarter, safer, and more efficient. Let yourself run, lift, flex, push, and go. Explore the new Peloton cross-training Tread Plus at onepeloton.com.
Today's episode of Locked On Jets is brought to you by Rippling. Rippling is the unified platform for global HR, payroll, IT, and finance all in one place. They've helped millions of businesses replace a mess of disconnected tools with one system designed to give leaders clarity, speed, and control. By uniting your employees, teams, and departments in one system, Rippling removes the bottlenecks, busywork, and silos your software created. Everything from onboarding to payroll to IT to access runs automatically and perfectly in sync. It's seriously simple to use and gives companies one source of truth for their people, data, and everything they touch. Whether you want to run your entire HR, IT, and finance operations as one, or just fill in the gaps in your software stack, Rippling can do it all. And right now you can get 6 months free when you go to rippling.com/lockedonnfl. Learn more at rippling.com/lockedonnfl. That's rippling.com/lockedonnfl for 6 months free. Terms and conditions apply. Thank you so much for making Locked On Jets your first listen or first watch every day. And a big shout out to you everydayers. This is a daily podcast covering the New York Jets with new episodes each day through the week, Monday through Friday. The Jets beat the Cleveland Browns yesterday, 27-20 at MetLife Stadium. Jets get their second straight win, and it is their second win of the season. A win that makes you feel good, I think, after a wild week. The Jets, of course, traded two of their three best players prior to this game, Sauce Gardner and Quinnen Williams at the deadline. Jets get a lot of draft picks in return, draft picks that could help them turn this thing around very quickly. It was difficult to say how the Jets were going to respond to this game, but there were a lot of guys who stepped up. And yesterday I did a post-game recap show. One of the things I mentioned is that I don't think the formula the Jets used in this game was super repeatable. And I think that sometimes we think there has to be deep meaning in everything that happens on an NFL field. Look, the Jets aren't going to win many games where Justin Fields plays like that. I mean, when your quarterback has 54 passing yards, you're probably going to lose more than you win. You're not going to face a rookie quarterback struggling to the extent Dylan Gabriel was struggling. And you're not going to have a performance the way Will McDonald produced yesterday. Will McDonald had 4 sacks. It was an outstanding game for Will McDonald. And this was a guy who I've been critical of. And I've been critical of him because he hasn't played very well prior to the Cleveland game. But McDonald really stepped up in a big way. And I don't know, maybe I need to criticize him more, because last week I did a show which has aged horribly because I said things like I didn't think the Jets would trade Sauce Gardner and I didn't think the Jets would trade Quinnen Williams. One of the other things I mentioned was that I was really worried about Will McDonald, his lack of progress this year. He responds with 4 sacks and 5 quarterback hits. And one of the things that I think happened in this game with the Jets defense, they allowed the Browns to put together drives. But it felt like there was always one super negative play. There was one play where the Browns took a big loss that put them behind the sticks. And that short-circuited a number of drives where Cleveland had an opportunity to take control of the game. Now, sometimes these were self-inflicted wounds by the Browns. Sometimes they just committed a big penalty. Again, Browns showed you why they're also 2-7. In some ways, I thought these teams were kind of a mirror reflection of each other. You saw why, at various points of this game, you saw why both teams are having so many struggles this year. But Will McDonald's performance, I mean, that was really top-notch stuff. That was outstanding. And Will McDonald's not going to have 4 sacks every week. The question is whether he can build on this performance. It's been a rough year for Will. I think my hope was that, when he added muscle this offseason, he'd hold up better in the run game. He hasn't. He's been a liability against the run. I think one of the things we've learned this year is that Will McDonald is probably going to be a passing downs only player going forward in his career, because, if adding that muscle can't help but be sturdier against the run, it's not going to happen. So the question is, can he generate enough pressure to justify his continued role on this team? And look, we're not going to get 4 sacks every week. We're not going to get 3 sacks every week. We're not going to get 2 sacks every week. We're not even going to get 1 sack every week. But can he generate pressure at a consistent enough rate? Last year he did. This year the pressure rate has been lower. So the hope is that this is the start of Will McDonald having a late season resurgence and building momentum heading into year 4 in 2026. This was an outstanding game either way. McDonald is now on pace for 13 sacks this season. I think if you watch the team this year, you know that he hasn't played at a 13 sack level, but this is the type of performance you build on. And I think it's true of so many Jets players. Question is whether or not, it's not just do you play well? Because lots of guys play well for 1-2 week stretch. The question is, can a good performance be something that snowballs? Can it be something that you build on going forward? I think also looking at the defensive side of the ball, one area where the Jets played pretty well, I think, was against the run. The Browns got their run game going a little bit in the second half. Now you look at the final stats. The Browns averaged 5 yards per rushing attempt, but that was because Dylan Gabriel scrambled 5 times for 54 yards. Jets had a few issues with containing his scrambles in the second half. And then our old friend Malachi Corley also broke off a pair of 16-yard runs on jet sweeps. If you look at the actual running backs, though, I mean, the Browns were held to under 3.5 yards per carry. I think the Jets linebackers bounced back in this game. Heading into the season, it seemed like Quincy Williams and Jamien Sherwood would be one of the top linebacker duos in the league, and it hasn't worked out that way this year, to the point where Quincy was actually kind of benched heading into this game. I mean, the Jets told him he was going to be benched, and then Kiko Mauignoa was injured and I guess couldn't play, so Quincy was back into the lineup. It was kind of reminiscent of what happened with Justin Fields a few weeks back, where Fields was supposed to be benched for Tyrod Taylor, and then Tyrod was injured and Fields stepped in and played really well. I thought this was Quincy's perhaps his best game of the year. Now, I don't really know there's much to build on with Quincy. I doubt he's coming back next year. In fact, the Jets coaching staff told him he's benched. It kind of indicates they don't really like him that much. And when Quincy has an opportunity to go somewhere else, I'm not sure he's going to want to stay with the team that benched him, especially a team that just traded his brother. Sherwood, though, is the bigger question, because I thought this was Jamien Sherwood, also one of Jamien Sherwood's best games. And Jets have a lot invested in Sherwood. He's kind of the leader of the defense at this point. He's making a fair amount of money at the linebacker position, and he's been a disappointment this year. And I say this as someone who's been a big Sherwood fan through the years. He's a guy who I've stuck up for, but he has not done the job this year. I thought this was a really encouraging performance. The question is, was it one encouraging performance against a really bad team, or is it something we can build on? And I think you also look at Jets special teams. Are the Jets going to return 2 kicks for touchdowns every game? Of course not. Jets going to return 1 kick for a touchdown every game? Of course not. But special teams matter. A lot of NFL games are decided by 1 score or less. Last year it was about 60% of the games. Special teams, when you can flip field position, when you make a big play, it can change things. And I think we've seen that Kenny Nwangwu, he may have a tough time staying on the field. It feels like suffers an injury every other week he's on the field. But when he's back there, he makes a difference as a kick returner. In fact, he's a guy the Jets should figure out ways to get involved on offense. When you're struggling so much with Justin Fields, the way the quarterback's playing, and you have such a dynamic returner, the Jets should be figuring out ways to get Nwangwu the ball in space, whether it's a screen, whether it's do things that simulate a return. Get him in open space and give him a chance to weave his way through defenders. But his ability to break big returns is the type of thing that can really help a struggling offense. And Isaiah Williams, who, look, I was as critical of him as anybody, especially after that horrific performance in Miami, where he put 1 ball on the ground and fair caught a punt on the 3. I asked why the Jets allowed him to get back in the good graces. The last 2 weeks, he's played really well. 2 weeks ago the last 2 games, he's played really well. 2 weeks ago against Cincinnati, he stepped in when the Jets were really banged up a receiver. And I thought put together a pretty good performance. And in this game, he broke that punt return for a touchdown. I think one of the themes of this game is guys I've criticized are really responding. I criticize Will McDonald. He comes up with 4 sacks. I criticize Isaiah Williams. He runs a punt back for a touchdown. And I think these are the types of things that if these guys can build on it, it's going to be a big advantage, because great special teams play gives you a big advantage. And I think the Jets are hoping that these guys are big parts of their special teams going forward. And, look, special teams alone aren't going to allow you to rebuild when you're at the bottom of the league. But once you've improved your roster to the point where you can be competitive, it's the type of thing that maybe just accelerates it a little bit. If you're a decent team, maybe special teams makes you good. If you're a good team, maybe special teams makes you great. So, you hope that these guys continue to play at a high level. Now, here on the Locked On Jets podcast, I hate to do it, but we're going to end the show by talking about a guy who's not playing at a high level. Justin Fields. What can you even say at this point? He comes back from a game where he plays really well against the Bengals and just can't really do much of anything. I think we know the end is near for Justin Fields as the Jets quarterback. We'll break it down continuing here on this Monday edition of Locked On Jets. Today's episode of Locked On Jets is brought to you by FanDuel. The NBA is back, and there's no better place to get in on the action than FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Even if you miss the start of the game or want to ride the hot hand, FanDuel has live bets on everything from who will score next to fourth quarter comebacks. Plus, you can even combine your live bets into a same-game parlay for a shot at a bigger payout. It keeps every game exciting, especially when your team's making that late push. And of course, FanDuel is also the place to get involved with the NFL. Jets are heading to Foxborough Thursday night for Thursday Night Football. And it's no surprise. A Patriots team that's been playing great football is a 10.5-point favorite over the New York Jets. Even though the Jets are on a 2-game winning streak, they are double-digit underdogs heading into Thursday Night Football. Well, if you want to get in on the action, FanDuel is the place to do it. And right now, FanDuel is giving new customers $300 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. So head to FanDuel.com to sign up and play your game with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the National Basketball Association. This is the Locked On Jets podcast on this Monday. The Jets beat the Cleveland Browns yesterday, 27-20 at MetLife Stadium. There were some good performances by the New York Jets. It was not a good performance, however, by the starting quarterback. It was another really lousy game by Justin Fields. And Fields has had one of the more interesting seasons you'll ever see a quarterback have, because when he plays well, he plays at a really high level. He played at a really high level week 1 against Pittsburgh. He played at a really high level right before the bye against Cincinnati. And then had a decent game in the Jets loss Monday night against the Miami Dolphins. But when Fields is bad, he is the worst quarterback in the NFL. It was that way against Buffalo week 2. It was that way when the Jets lost to Dallas. Certainly that way when the Jets lost to Denver in London. And it was that way yesterday. The numbers are just hideous. There's no other way to put it. Fields was 6 of 11 for 54 yards. So we averaged under 5 yards per attempt. And of those 54 yards, 42 of them came on the screen pass that Breece Hall took to the end zone. So really, there was nothing good Fields did. He also threw a really ugly interception where he lost track of a defender in the first half, which set up a Browns touchdown. And I think you've seen over and over why this experiment has failed. I think you've also seen why Fields always gets a job in the NFL. The high-end play is enticing, but I think what we've seen more than anything with Fields is that he's a guy who literally needs everything around him to be perfect to make it work. The games he's played well this year were games where Jets pass protection wasn't just good. It was phenomenal. The Jets offensive line played a phenomenal game week 1 against the Pittsburgh Steelers, slowing down some really dynamic pass rushers. Against Miami, where he played pretty well, the Dolphins don't really have much of a pass rush. Against Cincinnati, the only good pass rusher the Bengals have is Trey Hendrickson, who was a shell of himself because he was playing injured. When teams even have a normal pass rush against Fields, he gets rattled. And you saw him lose all of his confidence again in yesterday's game. After a game against Cincinnati where he was willing to throw the ball down the field, where he was willing to take chances, where he's willing to be aggressive, the hesitancy returns, particularly after the interception. And it's just really tough for the offense to move the ball. And it's a credit to Breece Hall that the Jets offense was able to have such success in the fourth quarter, because the Jets had 3 drives in the fourth quarter. 2 of them resulted in points. The one that didn't was successful because the Jets were able to run out the clock to end the game. But, you've seen over and over, and I feel like at some point it's just beating a dead horse, because we know Fields is not going to be around next season. In fact, the way Fields is playing, he's probably going to be out of the lineup sooner rather than later. Now, I don't think it's going to come Thursday night. I don't think the Jets are going to make a quarterback change on a short week. I also don't think they're going to do it off a win. I felt like in the first half of that game, Fields played poorly enough that he probably should have been benched, but Jets went to the locker room tied. The game was 17-17. And the way Aaron Glenn is as a coach, I don't think I wasn't expecting him to make a quarterback change at a point where the Jets were still in it. I think the only way Glenn's making a quarterback change is if the Jets are behind. And even though Fields really had nothing to do with the Jets being in that game, because of the 17 points, 14 came off special teams touchdowns, I didn't expect a change to be made. I think we all, I don't think anybody thought that the Cincinnati game was a turning point for Justin Fields. I mean, you could have hoped, but in all honesty, it seems like the fan base for the most part was pretty realistic. They know that Fields is either very good or very bad. When the Jets signed Fields, the hope was that you'd see the very good more frequently, and maybe the very bad would be less bad, and it would happen less frequently. That he'd be able to minimize the number of absolutely terrible games that he had. That a bad game would just kind of be one where he could still function, and it just hasn't happened. And we could talk about the reasons it's happened. Look, do I think Tanner Engstrand's built an offense that can maximize Fields' ability? No, I don't. I mean, I don't understand why the quarterback run isn't a bigger part of the offense. I don't understand why they aren't focused on giving him easier throws. I mean, like that Breece Hall touchdown was the only time Breece was targeted all game. You think they could design a couple more throws to Breece. That's one example. I mean, I could come up with other examples, but at the end of the day, Justin Fields is in year 5. He's on team 3, and he's had 4 coaching staffs. It ceases to be somebody else's fault at some point. And we have around half a season to go. I'm sure we're going to keep talking about Fields' struggles, at least until he's out of the lineup. But, this is just another reminder that this has not worked out. And it's pretty clear that it's not going to work out for this team. And I'm sure there are going to be good games ahead for Justin Fields at some point. The Jets will probably get some defense that doesn't know what it's doing, and Fields will start playing with confidence. And confidence is, I think, one of the keys. Being hesitant sometimes is just as bad as making a bad decision. In fact, hesitation is a bad decision, because sometimes there are throwing lanes that are only open for a very brief period. If you hesitate, you miss them. So sometimes hesitation when you play quarterback in the NFL is a mistake. Offenses are designed to be very intricate. They're designed to have very precise timing. And when the quarterback hesitates, he misses opportunities. And that's something that happens over and over with Justin Fields. And, sometimes you'll see him play with confidence. Sometimes he'll be feeling it early on, and you're on your way to a good game. It's almost like the Jets should have Tyrod Taylor prepare in case Fields has a bad first half. It's almost, I feel like at this point, maybe you give Fields the first half, and then if he's looking bad, you just pull him. And if he's looking good, you keep him in. I feel like that's kind of the point we're at with Fields. But we have half a season to go, so we're going to see this more frequently. I think it's clear that Fields has not found a way to minimize the damage when he's not playing well. And the Jets were able to win this game despite the quarterback play. The only big play they had in the passing game was entirely produced by Breece Hall making a great run after a catch on a screen pass. So there's no good news at the quarterback position for the New York Jets. I think we know that this Justin Fields experiment has failed. We know that Fields is not going to be here next year, most likely. The Jets will, probably have to eat some dead money to get rid of him. It just hasn't worked out. And I think any hopes that there was some faint chance after the Cincinnati game that maybe Fields has finally turned it around. And again, I don't think a lot of people believe that. I mean, I think most people saw that for what it was. Fields lighting up a really bad defense that couldn't get any pressure on him. But, another example of why it's just not going to work out for Justin Fields in this game. And fortunately, the Jets were able to win despite their quarterback play. So at least there's some positive you can take from it. But that's all for today's episode. This has been the Locked On Jets podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day is our motto. As always, if you enjoyed the show, hit the subscribe button where you're watching or listening so that you'll never miss an episode. If you enjoy the show and are listening on a podcast source, give it a 5-star review. And if you're watching on YouTube and enjoy the show, give this episode a big thumbs up. Helps us out, helps other Jets fans find the podcast. Enjoy your Monday, everybody. It is a Victory Monday, and we'll be back tomorrow to talk more Jets.